Hey y'all, this is Ryan Monso, and this is the Talking About Dana Holgorsen Doesn't Coach Here Anymore podcast from GoCougs.com. Brad Towns, who is very sad about Dana's dismissal, will join us in just a second, but we're going to talk Dana Holgorsen and the UCF game and other stuff, but probably just those two topics.
I'm Stuart Gus, official personal injury attorney of U of H Athletics. Cougar athletes have to trust their coaches and teammates, whether it's going for it on fourth down, nailing that three-point shot, or trusting your teammate to hit that walk-off home run. If you've been in an accident, big or small, do not go it alone. You can trust Gus to fight for your maximum recovery.
Call 866-TRUST-GUS today. TrustGus.com. Principal Office, Houston, Texas.
You got your doors blown off at UCF Saturday. It was another embarrassing effort, and finally, the administration had seen enough. Got the news Sunday morning around 10:30 that Dana Holgorsen was gone, fired from the University of Houston. Found out about an hour later, Dana Dimmel fired the University of Texas at El Paso. Brad, what was your favorite Dana Holgorsen memory?
Oh boy, God! There's so many. It's hard to choose. But I think the one that really kind of defines his entire tenure here.
I can't fucking coach this shit.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite one.
Well, it turned out he could not. It turns out that prophecy that he gave you in year one was basically the entire tenure. Everything wrapped up into one phrase.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he warned us.
Yeah. And what did we figure that he got after 5 years plus what he's going to be paid in the future? Are we around $35 million?
Yeah, I think out of pocket.
It's more than $1 million a win.
Out of pocket for right now, it's over $20 million, right?
Because he was at 4. He was at 4, so yeah.
Well, I mean,
I
think he started around 3.6, but the average value of the first contract was $4 million a year.
Right.
So including some bonuses like APR and bullshit like that. Out of pocket right now, $20 million, and we're on the hook for another 15 most likely.
18.4 or 18.8.
It's a hell of it. That's a hell of an investment, man. I wonder what would have lasted longer, your stack of $20 million in Dana or your stack of $20 million in FTX or Binance.
So I think this whole thing was a surprise to both of us. Not that he needed to be fired, because he did.
Oh, yeah.
But that this administration went through with it. They admitted that they made another mistake.
Yes.
And they made another mistake when they put themselves on the hook for such a ludicrous buyout. There was no reason to give him that much guaranteed over 5 years or 7 years or whatever it was.
No.
If you're the only person bidding on someone's services, and you know that to be a fact, you know that up front, no one else was bidding.
No.
There's no point in giving. I mean, what kind of negotiation is that?
I don't know. I mean, they must have gone to the Tom Hicks School of Negotiations. For those who don't know, Tom Hicks is the guy who bid against himself to pay Alex Rodriguez like $250 million for the Texas Rangers.
Yeah. I just, that never made sense to me.
No.
They did it coming off a 12-2 season. And it was come on. It was the saddest 12-2 you'll ever see. It was complete sham, and you were on the hook for the mistake you made of bidding against yourself. And it's really hard to figure that out.
Yes.
All right. Well, we agree.
I was I'll say I was in favor of bringing him to U of H. I thought it was a great hire.
100%.
100% behind it. I was hopeful, and I thought everything was going to work out. But after 2 years and then the 12-2 season, that didn't warrant a new contract, especially not one that had the exact same kind of buyout structure this had. Now, if you wanted to extend him but drastically change the buyout language, fair enough. But at that point, I mean, I guess I was the only one that was saying it at the time, and you know, I'm the Debbie Downer that pointed out that we barely squeaked by a terrible Navy team, that we barely squeaked by East Carolina, that we won. We needed a walk-off miracle against SMU. And the fact that we went, what was the record in that? We were
In what?
3-3 versus teams that finished with a winning record that year. So yeah,
then
3-2. I'm sorry, my fault.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it was a lot of, hey, ball bounced in our favor, which you need things like that to have really good seasons. I'm not going to discredit that, but it did not warrant a buyout with the same language for the extension, because like you pointed out, nobody was bidding. And at that point in the negotiations, that's when you've got to throw the whole we're friends, we're best buddies thing away and say, we're doing business here, and you've stated you ain't going anywhere. This is where you want to be. So we're going to do things that are going to be fair for everybody. And fair for everybody doesn't mean that you get this fat buyout if you decide to just kick back and kick your heels up and then tank it.
Yeah.
You only get one H-Town shutdown and survive it. You don't get two. And it sure felt like this year was number 2. Finally got the bar lowered enough to where you thought you could kind of cruise through it, and it just fell apart.
Yeah. U of H was required to negotiate. His first contract said if U of H reaches the Big 12, they are required to negotiate in good faith with him on an extension and more money. But that does not mean you were required to assure him all this money in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You were not required to give him 4 or 5 years or whatever it was, 4 years, 100% guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
That makes no sense.
Because you got no leverage in that. He had no leverage in that renegotiation.
But it turns out he had all the leverage.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, but let's go back into this season. This was a season of lows, followed by lows, followed by lows. Your true highlight was a moral victory.
Yes.
Like that's what you will point to for years as being the highlight of this season was a moral victory against UT.
Yep.
You got a bad spot. You got 2 of them actually. And after that bad spot, you tanked the rest of the year. You basically did not compete.
No.
You get blanked in Manhattan, Kansas. You make a 3-yard play at Baylor. I mean, really, that's what you did. You made a 3-yard play in overtime to get a 2-point conversion. And that's it. That's all you did there. The next week at Cincinnati, you laid down for the worst team in the Big 12 in half a dozen years.
Mm-hmm.
Cincinnati had 1 win this year in the Big 12. They had 1 win since September 9th. September 9th, and that was U of H.
Mm-hmm.
At home, at homecoming. Oklahoma State, you threw everything at them. Trick plays, a pick six, a safety, and you lost that going away.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to Central Florida the last week of the year and put together maybe your best drive of the last 8 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just a great drive.
Mm-hmm.
You did different things. You used Stephon Johnson in a way that you haven't used him all year, and that was kind of cool.
Well, I mean, in the first quarter, I believe he had more targets than he'd had in any other game the entire season.
Probably. That makes sense. Manjack saves you on that 4th down. 4th down.
Beautiful catch. Beautiful catch.
I mean, well, it was a great play. He was all the way across the field and scramble drill, and Donovan does not throw great on the run.
Right.
and Manjack made a great play. And you had a great drive, an amazing drive. This is Dana Holgorsen football.
Right.
And then nothing. Just got your ass whooped for 3.5 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that you could feel the floor coming out from under you was when you're down 3 scores in the fourth quarter, and you put together a 7.5-minute drive to go 30 yards. 7.5 minutes.
How many penalties?
Well, there were 3 on U of H, I believe, and 1 on UCF.
So, but U of H had 3 penalties, but then
At
they
least
also
2, maybe 3.
they also called a timeout because the play clock had dropped to 0.
The 0. It was at 0. They should have gotten a delay. They should have been another. But
I mean, that perfectly summed up what this program is right now. I mean, that just wrapped a nice bow right on top of it. That it's in complete disarray. Everything from the planning to the preparation to the development to the recruiting to the message to the public. I mean, everything is in complete and utter chaos. Nobody knows who's in charge of what. Nobody knows who's supposed to be doing what. It just summed it up real nice.
Dana has focused all year on running the ball. We're going to run the ball. We're going to be committed to the run. We are going to control the game. We are going to time possess. You finished 117th nationally out of 130 teams, 117th in time of possession.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like you had the ball for enormous fucking chunks of games. And you still finished 117th this season. You finished 105th in rushing. You didn't have a running back run for a touchdown in the last, 9 games? 8 games?
Yeah. Sam Houston?
Sam Houston was the last time it happened. Your running backs did not do anything over the last month. I mean, it was bad. After we wrote about this today, you were not a good rushing team all year. You just weren't.
No.
You weren't last year. You weren't good in short yardage situations.
No.
And I don't understand. What are you doing? What was the whole purpose this year? I think Donovan Smith regressed as the year went on. I think the running game regressed. I think the offensive line was about what you expected.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little better, maybe a tiny bit better than what you expected.
Well, I would say
that's not saying much.
No. I would say it's better than I expected in the fact that I expect it to be like historically bad.
Yeah.
Historically bad is what I expected. I mean, you got guys, you started virtually every game until this week with 2 guys who got demoted last year.
Yeah.
And they got demoted for a reason.
Yeah.
They weren't replaced by great players by any measure.
Mm-mm.
And you still couldn't find anything to plug in, even though you brought in 4 guys from the portal. After watching what we saw yesterday, now you see why. I mean, they were bad. I mean, they weren't dramatically worse, but they were noticeably worse.
Yeah. The problem is there was not a lot of, they looked pretty much the same. Like, if you didn't have numbers on the jerseys, would you really know that they were different? I don't think so.
No.
Donovan had 10 interceptions in the last 6 games. I think he only threw 1 on Saturday, so that was an improvement. So you got that going for you.
I don't understand how he could go from looking like he did fairly early in the season to what he wound up being towards the end.
One of the things is that balls that he threw that were clear interceptions were dropped early in the year.
That's true.
And they weren't dropped later in the year.
That's a good point.
And teams prepped for him. Teams were ready. They knew it. I mean, there are real professional coaches in this league. They pay them money and all.
Yeah, they're coaches that aren't terrible. But I mean, he had a string there, and this is the most frustrating part is that he started okay. He was efficient, Didn't look great against TCU, but then bounced back, had a really good game against Texas Tech, played well against Texas.
Played okay against West Virginia. Like in the middle part of the year, you were okay. He was okay.
And that's when he was starting to make the move. That's like, okay, this is the guy that, yeah, there are some mistakes, there are some things that he needs to tighten up, but we can see the progress at that point. And then Kansas State happens, which is ironically where he lost his job last year. But go to Kansas State, and he was just terrible. And then while showing a couple of flashes here and there against Baylor, he was overall pretty bad. And then the rest of the season, it's just been an abomination.
He made a really good throw on a wheel route to Tony Mathis in Baylor. And, the play I guess he scored on, that he kind of fumbled and they ruled it. He was down, and then he gets a 2-point conversion.
Right.
I think, that wasn't bad, but yeah, it wasn't great. It just wasn't great in the second half of the year. I don't think any part of your team, except for defensive line, got better as the year went on.
No.
And that's a huge red flag.
Well, and the worst thing about it is it turns out, going into the end of the year, we had three of the four worst teams in the league. Yeah, yep. Baylor, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and UCF. Oklahoma State's a really good team, but you had Baylor, Cincy, and UCF. I mean, you had guys that didn't recruit dramatically better than you the last few years. Not dramatically, but you had guys who performed about like you'd expect, except UCF is better offensively. But Cincinnati is in shambles. Cincinnati was gutted this time last year. Their head coach gone. Their top coach is gone. Their top recruits gone. They had guys transfer out that they were counting on this year. So they were literally starting from scratch, and they look like it. If you watch any of them yesterday, they're terrible.
They're pretty bad.
But they came into our place on homecoming and just laid down a beating. We're really fortunate for the overtime win and the Hail Mary against West Virginia, because this really is and should be looked at as a 2-win team, because that's what they are. The only thing saving them from not being dead last in the entire league is 2 very fortunate endings, because they're terrible. I mean, statistically, you look at pretty much every category across the board in the Big 12, they're the worst. If not the worst, they're no higher than 12th.
Yeah. Cool. There's just not a lot to hang your hat on, right?
No.
And you haven't, you beat what ended up being an 11-win team last year in UTSA. You beat a 9-4 SMU team in 2021. And you beat 4 8-win teams over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
So you had 6 wins over quote-unquote good teams.
Right.
The rest of your wins come against 7-6 or worse teams. 16 of 24 wins over the last 3 years are 7-6 or worse. I think 3, 5, 6, 8, 10 were against 4-8 or worse. And another one against a 5-8 Rice team, because they went to a bowl game at 5-7 last year. You didn't beat anybody.
No.
And 2 years ago, you won 12 games. Last year, you won 8. This year, you won 4.
Mm-hmm.
It took them a while to figure it out, but they figured it out that this program was going the wrong way.
I stated on here unequivocally that I did not believe he would get fired, and I was wrong.
You were absolutely wrong.
The only time I've been wrong about anything related to Dana Holgorsen since late September 2019, when the H-Town shutdown began. Ever since then, I've been right about everything. I told you he sucked. It just took time to prove it. And thank God we just make so much money at U of H that we can afford to learn my lessons. But
you've really been keeping track of these.
I've been keeping score. I've been bookmarking everything. I got receipts. But anyhow, it's over. It's over. I didn't believe that it was possible that Dana could get himself fired. Knowing what we had coming on the schedule, you have to really try to look this bad, as bad as they look, I mean, it takes effort to suck that bad. You could just not show up, and you could at least do better than that, right? But somehow, some way, the only upset of his career was him getting fired. Congratulations. Hell of an upset.
I had an interaction with Pez after the Baylor game in Waco, and it led me to think that, man, he is so dialed in to Dana, and he is so convinced he's the right guy. And I didn't think they were going to move away from Dana at that point, but it like cemented that thought in my head, like they're not moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess things were just so bad these last 3 weeks where you thought you could be competitive against Cincinnati. Well, let me rephrase that. That's not what we say. We do not say be competitive.
Well, no, that fits.
That's on me.
That fits. That's the thing is that they lowered the bar from we're going to be good to we're going to have a rough start. You know, we gone from 10 wins is success at U of H to we fire coaches at 8-4 to it's going to be a rough transition into the Big 12 to we just want to go to a bowl to God, we just want to be competitive. Dana, we're doing everything we can to try to keep your job here. We're going to lower this bar as low as you could possibly put it. All you got to do is jump just a little bit. But what does Dana do? He slides right underneath the bar, and he sucks so bad against Cincinnati and Oklahoma State and Central Florida that he took away their decision. They didn't have any choice. That's how bad he has been.
I'll have to give him credit for doing it, and because I really just never saw it coming. I just didn't believe they would do it.
Oh yeah, we saw it coming.
Silent,
we just
like
didn't think they would.
only. Right. You saw that the performance warranted this decision, but 100%. You didn't think that they were actually going to follow through and do it. Eat the contracts of the assistants that have to go, but they did. And so I say this with all the love and respect that you showed me, Dana, and you showed everybody else in the media who tried like hell to shine your shit for 5 years, who tried. Like, we want to write about a good story. We want to write about winners. It's awful to write week after week after week that the team didn't show up, that the team has no identity, that the offense sucks. It's awful. And nobody wants to read it, and nobody cares. But we wanted a story so bad, and all he did was crap all over everybody. So, Dana, I would say I'm sorry to see you go, but I'm really not. Because this is what all of the, certain guys can go and do things in the community and try and build themselves and build just some goodwill. He never once tried. Never once.
How do you think Aranda is surviving today?
Yeah. Well, ineffectual leadership. One.
Well, no, I mean, also, he's surviving. One, well, I mean, of course, it really helps when you win a Big 12 title. But the reason why is because he's a guy that gives everything he has. He's probably just not head coaching material. Phenomenal defensive coordinator, but he's a great person and engaging with everyone. And he's given everything he's got. And the thing, when I look at what U of H is right now, I don't believe that we're getting everything Dana has. I can't believe that because the history doesn't merit it. The history shows that he should be at least competent, and the things I've seen for the last 2 years especially have been complete contrast to that.
Email did. I mean, there's just no better way to say it. He stopped trying. And happy trails, Dana. Happy trails. So the season was a disaster until the day after it ended, and you got rid of the problem, or you got rid of the biggest problem. Cougs, talking about them Cougars. This is episode 1 this week. There's going to be an episode 2, and it's going to talk about who do we think's next.
Who knows? There might be an episode 3.
All right. No episode 3. Just do 2. We don't need 3.
We can do anything we want now. Hey, I'm happy. I'm happy.
Yeah, it's over. The long national nightmare is over. And the Dana Holgorsen era can be wrapped up with which is pretty much what he did. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you to Gus, Injury Lawyers, and Dave Campbell's Texas Football, Republic of Football Network. Renew, please take us away.
Yahoo!
I'm Stuart Gus, official personal injury attorney of U of H Athletics. As you know, a great quarterback wins championships. If you've been injured in an auto accident, big or small, you can trust Gus to quarterback your case.
Call 866-TRUST-GUS today. Principal Office, Houston, Texas.